Welcome to Channel 4's Pride panel. We're here celebrating 50 years since the first ever UK Pride, and we're going to be discussing LGBTQ plus representation on and off screen. And to mark the day, we have got some amazing panellists with us here today who have all been involved in productions which will be running on Channel 4. We have our own The Proud All Over campaign, which is going to be running across Channel 4 and All 4 from Thursday to Monday. And I think now we can look at the world's campiest clip. Let's go for it. Now, as well as the productions we're going to be talking about today, you're going to have Pride editions of Gogglebox, First Dates, Steph's Packed Lunch, and Rebel Dykes, as well as Freedom, 50 Years of Pride, and a profile doc, the first full-length profile doc on April Ashley, the trans superstar. It culminates in a big Pride party in Birmingham. Where else? Who needs Ibiza? And that's presented by Joe Lycett. But without further ado, I think we should introduce our panel. I'm Minnie Stephenson. I'm going to be moderating today. I'm a broadcaster for Channel 4 News, as well as relaying the deeply depressing news to you every day and sucking the fun out of life. I also say LGBT rights with my team, hopefully through the medium of journalism, occasionally when you're lucky. So let's kick off with the panel. Could you all introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'm Mike Ogden. I'm a director. I'm currently making outed George Michael and the Fight for Freedom, which will be on hopefully later this year. And my background is I've made loads of documentaries over the years, some gay related, some not. I think the thing I'm most fond of is a documentary about a gay sauna in Nottingham, which was Love in a Strange, Warm, Sweaty Climate. But the thing I'm most proud of is a series I've just finished. I finished last year for the BBC, The Nielsen Files, which examined homophobia in Britain and the Met Police and the failings around catching Dennis Nielsen, a serial killer.
Charlie, over to you.
Thanks, guys. My name is Charlie. I'm one of those annoying people. I don't really have one thing I'm good at because I'm not good at anything. So I'm like, I'm from an activist background. I started a campaign called Nail Transphobia about a decade ago now, and then I've since then kind of moved into the media space. So I presented BBC's Transitioning Teens on iPlayer still, ding, To My Trans Sisters, My Burke. I'm probably, sadly, still best known for being spat on. Not during Pride season, thank God, but that's me from that viral video. Happy Pride!
My name's Abby. I'm an assistant producer. I worked on Where Have All the Lesbians Gone, which went out on All 4. I'm a writer / producer. That's me.
I'm Alex Bingham. It's my voice. I'm a producer, mainly working on history programmes, so the usual treadmill of Windsor's, World War II and the Tudors. But I'm honoured to have been the producer on Freedom Pride at 50 for Channel 4.
So in a moment, we're going to look at the productions that these guys have been involved in. But first of all, I think it's only important to bombard you with some fun facts. The channel was, of course, first launched in 1982 by Margaret Thatcher and has its own 40th birthday this year. On New Year's Day in 1983, 2 months after the launch, it was an incredibly spicy move, but Channel 4 launched its first gay programme, 1 in 5, and some MPs called for it to be banned before it went on air. Now, the other amazing moment, which I don't want to trigger if there's any lesbians in the audience here today, but the first pre-Watershed lesbian kiss in 1994 on Brookside obviously broke huge taboos at the time. We almost got it right, but I think it's important to declare that we did get some things wrong, as that is the fashionable thing to do at the moment. Otherwise, we wouldn't, let's be honest. But it was decided that they would quickly kill off Beth after the lesbian kiss, causing outrage in the LGBTQ plus community. And so the documentary 3 Kisses and a Funeral was born, and we can see a clip of that now. Just taken back to watching that lesbian kiss with my parents and feeling incredibly awkward. But I'm glad they said horny and I didn't at Sheffield DocFest. So there's the moment. Now let's move forward. This is Pride season. There's been lots of special programming which Channel 4 have put together. We're going to start with Freedom, 50 years of Pride, and let's take a look at a clip now. So it's amazing to see all that footage back there, and it kind of encapsulates beautifully 50 years of Pride. But Alex, you were the assistant producer on this film.
I've been bumped up, I'm producer now.
Are you producing that? So congratulations. My apologies.
That's right.
I wonder, it's huge pressure in a way to kind of document 50 years, half a century of history. Do you have to just accept that you're not going to please everybody?
Yeah. We know that we will have left some people out, but I think that we were just, because the amount of time we had was quite short, we just had to stick with, this is not trying to be an overview of 50 years of LGBTQI plus history in the UK, it is Pride. So it always comes back to Pride, which in a sense is a brilliant jumping off point, because Pride, as we've seen, it just reflects the bigger social issues that are going on within the community and politics at the time. So, with Section 28, there was a huge marches in protest of that, and Pride reflected that. But yeah, unfortunately, we're all kind of like, when it's broadcast, we're just waiting for like, oh God, who have we left out? What's going to happen? But I think hopefully we've tried to fit as many people in as possible. We've got 30 plus interviews. We've also got this mad concert that Stephen Daldry and Joe Robertson put on at the Royal Vauxhall Tavern, and invited people from across the community to come and attend that as well. But yeah, I just think inherently with such a broad subject, you're going to not get it quite right.
And interestingly, we don't want to do too many spoilers, but you also, there's a nod to the culture wars that are happening in the LGBT world. I guess do you feel a pressure to have to talk to everybody from each corner of the community, or do you just have to accept that this is going to be through the lens of a couple of individuals?
I think ideally we'd have like a series, but that's not going to happen. I think we'll just try to be as representative as possible, really. And I mean, the reason why I picked the Lesbian Strength March was, I'm a bit biased, I'm a lesbian, but it shows that throughout Pride's history, Pride has split off in various ways to reflect the issues that certain groups feel are important to them, because some people, we do cover the fact that Pride is splitting up a bit, because a lot of people have felt that the main event in London or the bigger cities isn't representative of them. And that is a shame, but it is also, this isn't new. This is everyone trying to fight their own issues. But as Lisa Power says, it's about coming together when we need to, which I think is also very important. So.
And you make a good point about the shout out for all the lesbians. I wonder from the rest of the panel to get your thoughts. Do you think all too often we kind of see Pride on screen through a kind of white, gay, male lens? Do you think often it is retold in the eyes of gay men? Or do you think we're doing better now? Your thoughts?
I think, we do often see it through gay men, because it wasn't ever illegal to be a lesbian. So the fight has never been political in that way for women, because it wasn't legal. So the big things like Section 28 and the AIDS crisis, that mainly affected men. So it's been focused on that, which makes sense. But there's so many things about lesbian history that we don't know about, and I'm just learning about now as well.
Do you think part of the problem is that you are just erased in a way from the narrative? People, as you say, people just don't see lesbians.
Yes, I do. I think lesbian invisibility is a thing, and people only see us in porn or, as sad, angry people. They don't see the history and the things that lesbians have had to go through.
And we're going to come on to your film, Where Have All the Lesbians Gone, later on. But Alex, I was just wondering, do you, as an LGBT person, are you able to keep a real distance from these films, or do you find that it's actually very difficult to kind of step back? The truth.
The thing, I was so lucky with the team that we worked on, because we had people from, not unfortunately right across the community, but a lot of people who were able to look at it from their point of view as well and bounce ideas around. And so, if there were just a lot of gay men with their shirts off, the lesbians would be like, where are we there? Or if there weren't enough people of colour or this or that, it was. sorry, not to say people could do that, but, you know, just, it was, people did push forward their own agendas, but we realised that we wanted to do a good thing and not just make it all about ourselves, even though it was about ourselves, but
you had to keep that distance.
Yeah.
One of the things which comes across in this film, which everybody will see when they've watched it, is that, you know, there's lots of amazing archive, and you can see how much the language changes. So, you know, there's a lot of kind of chat about, you know, homosexuals and the gays, and does that make you, when, as you know, as program makers, do you think as well carefully about kind of the language and the framing of your subjects? Because TV ages very quickly, doesn't it? I wondered what your thoughts were when you were kind of going through all that old archive. Did you?
Yeah, we had to be careful, also with contributors, you know, as well. But I mean, even within the team, like the older members of our team would have a lot more kind of this is that view, and then there's sort of me in the middle, and then Ree, our amazing researcher. You must hire her for everything. She's so.
What's her name?
Rihanna Licorice.
Okay.
Rihanna Licorice, and she's so sort of embedded in the community and is so open and just knows the terminology, which I am afraid that I didn't know as much of it as I should have done. So it was kind of an education for us on the team as well. But in terms of the programming, the thing is we were interviewing a lot of activists, and they have moved with the times. So it wasn't quite as sort of as polarized as you might imagine. Like, they're very clued up and very invested in pride and, you know, LGBTQ plus issues now.
And the documentary looks at some seismic moments, as you say, Section 28 being one of them. You know, did you look at this documentary and think, I grew up in such a different time? Did it make you sort of grateful for the rights that you have now, in a way? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it made me... I only came out when I was late 20s, and at school, I was at school under Section 28, and I'm not saying that's the only reason, but there was a huge amount of inbuilt homophobia that I had, and my friend at school, who came out when she was 13, she's now actually my partner, she was going through such a tough time with how she was received at school, and, you know, she had serious mental health crisis because of it. And so much of that was like, if it had been dealt with in a different way, or if it was a lot more open, then I don't think I would have had that such an inbuilt thing. So for me, you know, it was, and I'd kind of forgotten about all that. And then looking at the Section 28 bit, I was like, that makes sense now, you know. So I've gone off on a tangent. What was the question?
No, it was a brilliant tangent, and I was going to bring in the panel as well. Did you know, having made LGBT programmes for Pride season, have you reflected on, you know, mostly growing up in an era where Pride hasn't been a protest, really? Do you kind of reflect on that and think how lucky we are, or do you think it's still under threat? What's your take on it, Abby?
Yeah, I do think that, for me, I've only really understood the importance of Pride, like, recently, and I've actually got an article coming about it soon, but the first time I really felt like Pride was a protest was when I went to Black Pride, and I went the day after I went to Pride, which for me was just like a party, get to see everyone I fancy and like hang out, get drunk. And then the next day, like there were like stalls and like workshops, and it was really family and community centered. And I do think a lot of people in my generation, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I do think most people don't see that side because we haven't really had to fight for anything. I think marriage came in, and that's like the only thing I can think of that really I didn't have as a right before that I have now. So yeah.
Charlie, I'm interested to get your take on it. You know, do you feel Pride is a protest, or do you feel...
Definitely in the last few, like, I'd say like half a decade for trans people, it's definitely become a bit more political and a bit more of a protest. Like, I remember a time, because I came out maybe like 10 years ago, where like Pride was kind of just fun, and it's shifted, and that's why we have things like Trans Pride now, why things like Black Pride exist. Obviously, like why we splintered off, because we're like pushing for like rights that maybe the mainstream Pride already feel like they're not focused on, because maybe they have. But yeah, like if we just look at the media landscape and how it's changed since the 10 years that I came out, it's just like, well, clearly we have a lot to be protesting and a lot to be upset about and shouting about.
Which brings us neatly to the founding sister, really, of the movement, April Ashley. Oh.
Oh my God.
thought it was a pretty...
someone was screaming.
I thought April Ashley had come back into the room and had decided to like...
She was like, I do not approve this documentary.
That introduction is not how I want to be remembered. Gosh. So we have the extraordinary life of April Ashley, a model, dancer, restaurateur whose rollercoaster life took her from the slums of wartime Liverpool to a world of celebrity friendships, a landmark divorce trial, and an MBE for services to equality. I think we can now take a look at the clip. Charlie, an incredible extreme eye roll from you there in the documentary. Thank you for letting us relive it. Now, April Ashley, of course, was one of the most prominent transgender women in the UK, across the world, actually. Yeah. But Channel 4 are airing the first ever feature-length documentary about her life. It seems incredible that it hasn't been done before. It is beautiful, the documentary. Why do you think it's been such a long time coming?
I guess, do you know what, like, I feel like April Ashley is probably someone only trans people and maybe a few of our queer, like, LGBT brothers and sisters would know about, especially, like, being older, especially, like, kind of not being in the media zeitgeist in the way that, like, current celebs are and stuff. She's a bit of more of like a myth and a legend, but, like, in the same way, I'm sure, like, you feel there's probably, like, black icons who, like, the mainstream of our community don't know about, but you're like, why don't they know about that? Like, it's very that. So, and I know, and things like the fact that she's just not been in the media for a long time. She's old. I mean, it's because she passed away that, like, they made this, and like, her book was, one of her books at least was, like, taken out of print, and there's just, I guess this is why things like this are so important, because as a marginalised community, like, it's in our hands to preserve our history and our legacy, because mainstream's not. Well, like, mainstream clearly is now, which is amazing. Happy Pride. But, like, it's so important because, like, until this, like, if this didn't exist, where you're going to find out about, she'd existed a time before social media, obviously, and YouTube and film in general even. So, like, we need to document our histories as queer people and as marginalised people.
Channel 4 kind of led the way with this documentary, but, I mean, I guess what you're getting at as well is that this doesn't happen very often, right? Do you see yourself represented on screen ever?
Oh God, well actually the first time I ever saw myself represented on screen was on Channel 4 on Big Brother, when I saw Nadia, when I was about, I think I was probably like 10, when I saw Nadia, obviously the trans woman on Big Brother. So it's quite sad really that I got to like 10 or 11 where I hadn't even seen a person like me before, and I was very young expressing gender variance. I was probably like 4 when I was telling my mum. My mum actually remembers me telling her I was a girl before I have a memory, like a sense of memory, like that's how much it predates, which I think shows how pure it is as well. But it was Nadia, so when I was 10, it was the first time I saw someone and I was just like, oh my God, that's exactly how I feel inside. I didn't even know you could transition. I didn't know what a trans person was. So yeah, Channel 4 has kind of always been at the forefront of representation for me at least. And then actually so it was at least another 10 years before I accepted myself as trans, even though I saw Nadia and finally had a word for it. It wasn't until I saw My Transsexual Summer, maybe 10 years later almost. And again on Channel 4, thank you Channel 4. And it really, I think there was a generation of trans people who came out after that, because we finally kind of, between Nadia and that, please tell me one famous trans. I mean, there was pre-Laverne Cox, pre-Paris and Monroe and Janet Mock, and there was just no one. There was literally no one. So like, and the only time you would see us would be when we were either like punchlines or punching bags in sitcoms or on Jerry Springer or Maury, you know. So like, I think that's why it's really important to have positive representation, because then people finally feel safe enough to come out, and I'm sure that's kind of a reflection on all communities.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because, you know, all too often kind of representation becomes a sort of buzzword and people, it can be quite hollow and empty.
Yeah.
Sometimes it gets banded around.
Yeah.
But actually, as an LGBT person,
yeah,
it sounds like you seeing Nadia on Big Brother was crucial to your kind of coming out.
I literally wouldn't have come out because I wouldn't know what it was. So like, thank God that she was there, because I literally didn't even have a word for it. How I was 10, 11, I didn't even know what trans was. So like, how can you be what you can't see, you know? And even beyond that, about like, even if you know it's there, like I then knew Nadia's there, how can you be what you can't see? How can you be happy if you can't see happy? I saw trans people, but like I said, we were only ever jokes in sitcoms, or literally like dead sex workers played by a cis actor on like CSI New York, you would never see a trans person. I was like, I don't want to be that. Like, life was hard pre-transition. I was always a very effeminate person. So like, and I grew up in a council estate. It was hard, but like, I didn't think I was ready for how hard transition was going to be. So when I started seeing like portrayals of happy trans people, that's when it shifted. And I think that's what we need more of for all kind of the queer community in terms of representation, because, and I think the LGBT communities, or at least the gay community, started shifting there. But like, in that our whole depiction of us in the media isn't just centered around being gay, being lesbian, being trans, being bi, being whatever, and trauma around it. It's nice to watch things like Heartstopper, obviously not Channel 4, but like, it's so nice to watch something where it's just pure gay joy, and there's nothing in it that's about like, oh, like, you know, it's so important. I think like a generation of young people will grow up having watched that as one of their first representations of themselves, and understand it's limitless. They deserve to be happy, and that's something I didn't think I deserved for a long time, because I just never saw, I didn't know you could be happy and be gay or be trans.
Because there is this culture war playing out in the medium, which everybody is watching kind of in real time on Twitter, do you think there's a nervousness from commissioners and from TV channels about commissioning trans-led documentaries or presenters? What's your take on that? Do you think they're doing enough, or...?
Yeah, I mean, as a trans presenter who had to, like, obviously for the BBC, had to be unbiased and, you know, like, balanced and stuff, and include things in my documentary that I really didn't want to, I understand it, but I think there needs to come a point where you understand that, like, it's not about balance. Like, I think people understand it better when you, like, take the word trans out of it and put a different community and say you wouldn't talk about balance in, like, if you're making a documentary about like any other kind of ism or phobia, you wouldn't be like, well, to have balance, let's put someone really extreme and who thinks that you actually are a predator and a paedophile, and like literally words that these people are saying. Like the BBC, literally like a month after my documentary came out, the top dog comes out saying, oh, you can't go to prides, and then limits it to trans prides. Also, then they published like an actual sexual predator who's like out, like been banned from the porn industry, who's an actual RAPIST, sorry, trigger warning, I should have said trigger warning, and like has done stuff with like young people as well, and she's on the BBC calling trans people a predator, and it's like, what fucking world are we living in where the BBC, the biggest kind of like platform, the news platform in the world, is giving a platform to an actual sexual predator, calling my whole community sexual predators, and it's on the front page of BBC News. It's like a wild time we're living in, and so like, I think there needs to come a point where I understand that balance is not always, you don't need balance if one is beaten down on the other. I'm not beating down on your community. I just want to exist. I just want to not be spat on the tube. Like, sorry, I'm going to cry, but like, it's so tiring. I'm so tired. Sorry, I'm really tired. Another eye roll. I just did another, I'm the queen of eye rolls.
Well, it's clearly really exhausting, and I wonder what's your strategy for coping with that? Do you
I'm not, help!
No, you are! You're being brilliant, but do you...
Sertraline.
Do you mute... yeah, sertraline is good, I have to say. Do you mute social media?
I have come off Twitter because I've been ran off. I've been called a paedophile. I've been called all the names beyond you're disgusting. Names like actual like libel and defamation of character and ruining my career. Like, I'm just like, I can't do this. And my main source of income has been an influencer. To be run off social media is like, okay, well, I guess I'll just not eat then, you know? It's really hard right now. And I just, like, with it being Pride season, I would really like implore, like, it's so, you've heard it all before, but please, like, stand up for your trans brothers and sisters in the way that we would stand up for you. Like, I'm gonna actually cry, but just like, my whole life is my community as a like broad LGBTQ plus community, and like, if any of you were being like in real life or in the media being attacked, I would fucking die for my community. So it really hurts to feel like it's often just trans people and a few really good allies from the LGBT community like standing up for us. And I think the thing is when I say stand up for us, I don't mean that the rest are against us. I mean the rest are just like neutral and silent. It's a very small minority of people, I think, who are actually against us, but they're for some reason given the loudest voice in the media because it's obviously selling papers and stuff. So really, I'd say like most LGBT people are actually on our side, on the T side, but we just need a few more of them to stand up and say, actually, like, this isn't okay. Leave our brothers and sisters alone, you know.
Why do you think people aren't being kind of active participants? Do you think?
Because it doesn't affect them, maybe, and they've maybe become complacent in the same way. Maybe like I think until like we look at things like the Black Lives Matter like kind of uprising in a couple of summer ago, I think a lot of people just don't realise that actually like they need to say something, and that they're like actually like people are like when they're not affected by something and they're like, just like, oh yeah, they just kind of put it to the back of their mind. That's sad, but then but then I think it's a bit of that people need to actually realize we have a duty for this. And like I always say as well, like, if you don't think they're going to come for you next, like they are, I promise you now, every argument that they can use on the trans community, oh, don't let trans women in bathrooms, they're a threat to women. First of all, I don't even like women. Second of all, so why are like lesbians allowed in the bathroom? Like, why do you not think they're going to start saying, well, what if a straight men start saying, what if Piers Morgan started saying, I don't want straight gay men in my bathroom. I've seen one of them looking at me while I was using the urinal. They shouldn't be allowed. There should be a gay bathroom. Like, what is next? Like, they can use the same arguments on us, and we see it in real time in Hungary, where like there was like, just like in British media, there was a real pushback on trans people, and in the high courts even repealing our rights. And because none of our LGBT brothers and sisters start for us, now they're coming for the LGBT people in Hungary, and they've banned gay adoption. They're trying to ban like all the, they will come for you next, because they can, once they get a bit of traction and they get the public on side, they can just, with like abortion in America, they can just steamroll. Like, it's all rooted in that kind of, yeah.
And a lot of the things that we're talking about now obviously affected April Ashley at the time. Just one final question on the documentary. Watching some clips of it, as you'll all see when it comes out, April's actually received on chat shows in quite a cosy sort of Lorraine Kelly style way.
I noticed that.
She doesn't feel like, in the documentary and at the time, as much of a threat, it seems. And we were talking about this a bit before the panel started. But why do you think that is? Why do you think April seems to be, although the tabloids were very nasty to her and she had a lot of backlash, but it feels different. Why is that? I
think you nailed it, because we were talking backstage about it being, she wasn't treated like a threat because it was just her. She was like the 9th person in the world, I think, to have a SRS. She was like, I think she was seen as like, oh, there's just a few of those in the whole world, like almost like aliens, like almost a bit of a freak show. And it was like, okay, they're over there, we'll like be polite to them, and like, well, the newspapers weren't, but like the guest, I think was it Parkinson or someone really big interviewed her, and they were actually very nice to her, and I was shocked, because I'm like, bloody hell, like, I didn't expect that. But I think it's because we weren't seen as a threat, and now with like a lot of trans people having come out, like people from her generation who just didn't feel safe to, like, until recent years, I think the people who are scared of queer people are starting to be like, oh, actually, there's a few too many of you now, so you've gone a bit far, children are transitioning. No, like, we are a threat now. I'm trying to wrap up on a nice note. Watch the documentary, that's a nice note. And here's another eye roll. Thank you.
Standing eye roll. Thank you very much for your eye rolls and analysis. It's very appreciated. Now, we're only going to discuss icons here today. So our next icon is one that you'll all be familiar with. He's everybody's mum's favourite. I'm not just talking about Michael Ogden. We are, of course, talking about George Michael. Let's have a look at a clip. George Michael was famously outed as a gay man. I just wonder, he means so much to so many different people. You know, he meant something to my nan, he means something to the LGBT community. He'll mean different things to the audience here today. But which side of George did you want to, George, I'll call him like we're friends.
Yeah, of course.
George, babes, George. Which side of George did you want to reflect in the film?
Well, first, we're still making it, so we're still discovering.
It's exciting, such an adrenaline rush.
In the
right
moment,
to the wire.
I'm going to see Kenny next week. But for me, what's really interesting about George is he becomes kind of a powerhouse of gay rights, and is always sort of fights for what he believes in from the moment he's outed, and he defends his position with pride. He has no shame about who he is, what he is, and he goes cruising and cottaging, and he phones up Richard and Judy. And I just love the idea that he became this man who becomes a man who fought for our rights, and you know, that was ever more important for him. And I think that for me is what's really brilliant about him. And when the film is a prism to look back at outings throughout the 80s and 90s, and what you see is tabloid press shaming men and women for being gay, and outing them and dragging them out and destroying their lives. And that's sort of what the film explores.
I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, as an LGBT person, and maybe the panel can relate to this, you know, you are often by the tabloids, but also you have a lot of internalised shame. Yeah. And he sort of very much leans into his gayness, doesn't he? It sort of says the ultimate fuck you.
Yes.
Which is, I'm just enjoying being able to swear. I can't swear on the news, so. But you make an interesting point there, but how much of that is reflected in the documentary then? Do we see documentary moments of this kind of, do we see interviews of him? Who do you talk to?
Yeah, so we talked to, there's a whole range of people we talked to, and people close to him like Kenny Goss, who was there. And for Kenny, Kenny was there when George was arrested, sort of in the vicinity, and, you know, George phones home, but for Kenny, Kenny's outed as well. And so it's sort of an impact on him, and his family sort of lived in Texas. And I was talking to him the other week on the phone, and he was sort of saying, you know, I was sort of a redneck from a redneck town, and suddenly I'm being outed in this way. And so actually the impact on him is huge. And so we sort of, we explore that impact on people. And that's what it's really about. It's about how that impact reverberates through families and friends and relationships, and how you have the power to out yourself taken away from you. And that's the heart of it.
That's interesting. So they're casualties in a way for George's outing. You know, it's great that he was kind of gay and proud, but I guess the people on the periphery or even close to him became sort of casualties.
Yeah, completely. And we look at other cases of people that were outed as well. What's really interesting is going to meet them about how it destroyed their lives, but how it impacted mothers, you know, mothers and fathers, siblings, friends, partners. And it's that sort of domino effect that it hits. And after, you know, a newspaper is done, it's gone, and it's forgotten about and moved on, but it's not for family. And for the people I've been meeting who were outed, it impacts them to this day. They still feel it. They still feel it as if it's trauma.
I'm interested to know whether it's changed your own perception of George Michael, having sort of deep dived so much into his life, and I imagine kind of lived and breathed George Michael, you know, day and night at the moment. Yeah. Has it changed kind of what you thought of him before making this film?
Well, because I always thought, when I was young, I thought Wham and George Michael were really naff. Because, sorry, well, I know.
Blasphemous.
I know, sorry.
From the director of.
I know the director. I no longer feel like that, so that's fine. That's
Thank
one
God.
thing. But also, I think that was. It was interesting. I was talking to somebody about it the other day, and they were somebody who managed Wham and George in the early days, and he's gay himself, and he was saying, of course, we never saw it, even though he's very gay and everything. But they never saw it at the time either. But I always think I did see it, and I hated it because I knew I was a young gay boy and couldn't bear to look at that world. And then the sort of, you always wonder, well, why did George leave it so late? And sort of it's an open secret in the industry. But what you have to realise is that it's about yourself, and you've got to come to terms with yourself about who you are and what you're dealing with and the pressures you're under to accept yourself. I only came out when I was in my 20s. I'd moved to London, I'd left home. And I think that's the thing people don't realise. People, you know, assume it's a bit of a joke when somebody's outed, and everyone sort of talks about it as if, well, everyone knew anyway. But it's about how you deal with that and how you internalise that and how you have to love yourself before you can do that.
It was a very public outing in the tabloids for George Michael, like for April Ashley as well in the 60s.
Yeah.
But it was at a time when, you know, it was quite common not that long ago to out people, wasn't it, in the newspapers. You sort of just, you know, almost a bit like, we're just going to run a feature, I'm just going to out somebody. It's also quite casual. So was that kind of interesting to look at and think, wow, this was a time when that was quite sort of normalised, wasn't it, outing people?
Yeah, it happens all the time, and you'd see, you know, just be nice to say, such and such person last night admitted that they were homosexual. Or such and such person last night confessed they were homosexual, or an active homosexual. And it's about the language, and you think, oh, it's just a small piece. But actually, it's really, and we'd sort of flip through the archive and then miss it, and then go back and go, there's another outing. Oh, there's another outing. And it was constant, and what you realise, it's constantly there. And it's about the language, it's about shame, and it's about, you know, admitting you're homosexual, confessing you're homosexual, active homosexual. It's about shaming who we are. That's all it was about.
That's really interesting, a sort of hangover from Section 28 in a way, that we're sort of still kind of criminalising being LGBT. And are you thinking about that throughout the whole process of making the documentary? Are you thinking about how will this be received in 10 years' time? Are you thinking about, you know, it's such a fast-moving area, isn't it? And language changes so quickly, or are you just living in the moment, like George?
I'm living in the moment, but also it's you know, recently there has sort of been there have been stories that, where people are almost being outed again, and so it is there, it is happening, and it's never quite gone away. We interviewed Will Young, and he, although he outed himself, it was because of pressures from the tabloid press that he had to do it at a time that wasn't right for him. That happened with Philip Schofield. That happened recently with Rebel. Yeah. So it's about tactics have changed.
But it's still there,
It's still
just
there.
kind of dressed up in different clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now, it's a question that I often ask myself. Where have all the lesbians gone? It is one of the biggest questions of our day. Abby McIntosh has worked on the documentary, who's with us here. She deep dives into the issue head first. Inappropriate joke. I didn't mean it to sound so weird. So let's have a clip. Let's have a look. There you go, very unfiltered moment of what it's like to be a lesbian, and it's a fantastic documentary if you get the chance to watch it. It's not only kind of heartwarming, but it's also actually very funny at points as well. Abby, why do you think lesbian has become such a dirty word, as is explored in the documentary?
I think it's because the word lesbian, when people think of it, they think of porn, they think of threesomes, they think of angry, hairy, vegan, scary woman. I think that there are other words people use now. You can use queer, you can use gay woman. Lesbian just feels old-fashioned to some people. Yeah.
And do you get those stereotypes a lot? Because I personally have to declare I'm a lesbian. People constantly asking me, "You're a vegetarian, aren't you?" I'm like, I've literally never said I'm a vegetarian, ever. But they're always like, "You're a vegetarian, aren't you?" I'm like, "I know, literally, no." I'm like, I'm pro-me. I'm like, I love KFC. But I get it all the time. I get it all the time. But do you get, I mean, I guess you also,
Yeah.
do you get a lot of, do you get that?
I get a lot of, "You're too pretty to be a lesbian, I never would have guessed, are you sure, you're not bisexual?" Yeah, I get it all the time.
And what was the kind of MO of this documentary? Was it to kind of break down those stereotypes and kind of show a different side to being a lesbian?
Yeah, because I think you don't really see lesbians on TV that much ever. I've never seen a documentary like this. When I was doing research for it, all the documentaries I did watch, the lesbians were really sad and their lives were really sad and the future looked really bleak. And I think when I was growing up, the future for a lesbian didn't look fun at all. I thought I'd have to be really political, really hairy, really butch. There aren't that many black lesbians, so I didn't know what life was going to be like as a black lesbian. So I think that's why it was really important to make a documentary so people could actually see what lesbians are like, because there isn't one way to be a lesbian, and I think that's something people don't really realise, that we're not actually all the same, believe it or not. So.
And you make a really interesting point, because I think, when I was growing up, I've found the same thing, that there were sort of lesbians with these sort of mythical creatures that hung around like in Stoke Newington in kind of basement bars, and they didn't really look like me. How important do you think it is then to have, lesbian representation on screen or LGBT representation?
I think it's so important because, as you were saying before, like, you can't be what you can't see. And it took me so long to come to terms with being a lesbian because I just didn't think it was possible for me. I didn't see anyone else who looked like me. I didn't know what I'd be able to do and where I'd be able to go, and like, what would life look like? Would I be happy? Would life be fun? So it's really nice to make a documentary where every woman in it is so different, and there are so many different stories, and there's so many different possibilities, and there isn't one way to be lesbian.
And one of the things that comes across in the documentary is how funny everybody is. I guess it seems like you wanted to debunk this idea that like lesbians are earnest and political and hairy, and which they can be, that's fine. But yeah, what did you want to kind of smash some of those taboos?
Yeah, because we have a lot to be upset about as lesbians, but we are actually very funny. And the set was amazing. Like, I feel really proud of the space that we made because, like the clip with Louise, we talked about some really sad stuff, but there was also so much joy, and like, it was just such a lovely experience to be able to speak to so many different lesbians and share, like, we all have like in-jokes. Like, the set was like just so nice to be on because we didn't really have to explain ourselves, which you don't really get that often. It was just great. I loved it.
Was it made exclusively by lesbians, or did you allow some straights in? How did it work?
We had one or two, but the main core was lesbians.
So you had a couple of token straight
Yeah,
people.
you have to, you know.
Yeah, you got to tick the box.
Diversity.
You got to tick the box. Nightmare, isn't it? Absolute nightmare.
Were they the execs?
One of the things that came across also was that this obsession with lesbians and their sex lives, and there was lots of montages of sex toys, which I enjoyed. But why was that important?
Because I think when people do think of the word lesbian, automatically, especially if you're a straight man, you think of porn, you think of kissing, you think of threesomes. And I think we spoke to a lot of women in the documentary who were scared to come out because of that, and have had experiences in bars where men ask them to kiss for them. Actually, what's really important is one of the main periods of time that I saw lesbian in the news was when the lesbian couple was attacked on the bus. I think that's the only time in my life I've ever seen lesbians on front page news again and again and again. And we spoke to someone called Charles in the documentary who is femme and her girlfriend is femme. Her fiance now, they're engaged. And she finds it so uncomfortable, like she doesn't want to hold hands. They're like constantly like chased and asked for like sex. And I think people don't really realise that that's still happening. And also some people don't understand that that's not okay. Like some men think it's their right to ask you for a threesome still. So I think it's really important to talk about that.
And some people always think it's sort of a compliment to sort of overly sexualise you and objectify you.
Like, I'm not blind, I know I'm attractive, but I don't want to sleep with you.
It's awkward to bring it up, isn't it? Now, one of the things that it also touches on is the lesbian scene being dead. All the kind of the gay bars are gone, and has that been in your experience? Do you think they're all gone? Is there an extinction of lesbians? Is what I'm getting at here.
I remember when I came out, there were not that many places, but I knew that there were some bars I could go to. I could go to Candy Bar. There were a few like dotted around, and we spoke to some people who were younger and coming out now, and there is one place in London that you can go to if you're a lesbian, one lesbian bar, and it's horrible and small. And I think that there's been such a change, especially after the pandemic, in the lesbian scene, and I feel like some people don't know where to find lesbians at all, which is really sad because I knew that there was a community out there waiting for me. And I think social media is helpful because people can find other lesbians online, but I think it's really important to have spaces where you can meet and talk. Like working on this documentary, I got to speak to a great-grandmother who's a lesbian and like young lesbians, and you don't get that in real life. There's nowhere that everyone can go. So I think it's really important to have spaces.
And I know this is something you've talked about in the past, but do you think TV needs to make more of an effort to kind of show LGBTQ plus people in a multicultural sense as well? Do you think all too often it's seen through a very white lens?
Absolutely. I think there aren't enough lesbians from all races on TV. I think there's still a lot of work to do with representing all of us, because I do think there are so many different experiences as a lesbian, and I think what I go through as a black lesbian is very different to what you'll go through as a white lesbian, and I don't think there are enough conversations about that on TV.
And just to bring in the rest of the panel here, we've talked about kind of having more lesbian representation, but I'm mindful that we need to be inclusive and not just talk amongst ourselves as lesbians. But do you think we need to get to a point where we are just having, gay actors on gay productions, gay producers, and we don't have straight people playing gay roles, and we don't have straight producers on gay productions? What's your take on that highly contentious topic? That's a tricky one.
It's interesting.
Do you want to phone a friend?
Yeah, I kind of do. Well, I mean, being gay is not a performative act, so it's what I am. So that's very tricky. Can a straight person play a gay person? It's really hard. But then actors perform. So I don't know. Pass.
Pass.
Yeah.
I've got an opinion. My opinion, and as an ex-gay, now a trans woman, maybe future gay, because I hate men, no offence to the men. Which is proof that being gay is not a choice, because if it was, I would be gay. But is that, even aside from all that, it's like, how many fucking roles are there for gay men? You will never be the leading man in a film, big film or something. Like, how many roles are there? How many gay actors are there? So to have that Tarragon, whatever his name is, playing all his fucking roles are gay. He's playing that new cock thing. He did the Elton John thing. I'm like, you're like taking a role that some camp gay man who's never going to get the main role in High School Musical is going to, do you know what I mean? Like that's my issue, is that like, there's, in the same way as like I've started acting, there's how many roles are there for trans women? If like, I'm kind of, could you please leave them for us? You know, there's not many.
They're taking our jobs.
Yeah, taking our jobs!
I hear you, sister. Right, okay, I think we're now going to open up the floor for questions. So who would like to go first? Lady in the blazer, maybe? Any questions for a panel? You can ask pretty much anything.
Oh.
Ooh.
Yeah.
No questions? Oh, there we go, thank God. Thanks for putting us out of our misery.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you first for a really wonderful and interesting and challenging panel. It's really refreshing to hear you guys challenge the industry that you're in and that you're working in, so thanks for that. My question is, what do you think the future of the industry looks like that would be LGBT plus inclusive? And what's your one thing at the moment that you would like to change in the industry?
I feel like with the industry, especially after lockdown, you know, there's the triangle, which is good, fast, and cheap, and you can only have two. You can't have all three. But now I feel like everyone wants all three, and there's just not enough time or money to make the programs that are worthy of the stories that we're telling. And this is not to say that the stories we're telling aren't brilliant, but I found with this project, like, I just knew there was more we could dig and not just find the people that everyone recognises. So if you want to get to those deeper down stories, and I think it's amazing what the people that you found, you're just going to have to give us a bit more time, and a bit more room to just sit with projects and find people and breathe. And if we want to get more representation and think about getting more stories, we just can't keep churning stuff out the way we are. And there's the end of my career. So
It's lovely to be at your wake. No, I think we can all relate to that in many different spheres of the media. Abby, what would you like to improve, do you think?
I think I agree with that. I also think that there aren't enough documentaries being made, point blank. Like, I think with ours, we were so worried that we felt like we had to represent the whole community, because when would there be another opportunity for a documentary like this to be made? And like, that's such a scary thing to think about. Like, the week leading up to it, I was like, oh my God, have we done this? Have we done this? Have we represented this person or that person? And that, of course, we should be trying to represent everyone, but like, that shouldn't just be on us. We should know that there will be another one made next year or the year after. It can't just be this documentary and that's it. So I think, don't be afraid to commission things, because people will watch it. There shouldn't just be one lesbian documentary, and that's it.
Thank God it's a good one, though.
Yeah, thank God.
Charlie?
I guess just like, and we've got 2 people here, well, 3 people here, but wait, no, you're not behind it. I was gonna say more people behind the camera. Like, I know, like, most of my job doing influencer stuff is just in front of the camera. We literally just get wheeled in and out and into like an idea created by like a cishet person, and you can feel it. It's like, it's not as authentic. And I think when our stories are told by us, they're so much more powerful, so much more authentic. It's better for everyone, really. And I think that's what we need more of, is us telling our own stories.
Otherwise, I guess you get into this sort of othering situation.
Yeah, yeah.
With David Attenborough-esque fascination with a culture, really.
And they just don't go deep enough as well, or they don't hit on the issues that you think. I think we need more say in steering and stuff, and yeah, and even just on like your treatment. I guess like my documentary, I was misgendered pretty much every day on set, and it's like, we're making a documentary about transphobia, really, guys? Like, come on. Like, could you not have employed, like, I don't know, other queer people who would get it, or like even cis people, allies, you know? But I think it's really important to have people behind the camera that are reflective of the kind of message you're trying to get across on front of the camera.
And Michael, what would you change?
It's too easy and too boring to keep hearing how difficult it is to hire diverse people. It's fucking tedious to be told that constantly. Oh, these people aren't out there. They are. Look harder. Yeah. It's not that difficult.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh, we've got some confidence. Great.
Hello. Firstly, thank you so much for the panel. It's just been a really lovely way to have this in the middle of the day. So just thank you for all of your insight. The question I have is: do you know of any networks or places that we can all go to, as you know, us being people in TV and in film, where we can rally together and support each other? Because as Charlie said before, it's fucking tiring to be doing this work. And as Abby's just said, if there's only one documentary that's being commissioned and all of this weight is on your shoulders, essentially we're all kind of in a similar position to a big degree in terms of trying to share a message about our community. And we could all do with just being able to help each other and shortcut processes and maybe help to introduce people to other people. Do you know of any resources and places that we can go to do that? And if not, is there a way that we can set something up?
An invitation to start a movement. Yeah. Does anybody know of anywhere where you can... We'll start one.
First meeting after this.
It definitely sounds like there's a big need for a kind of queer network.
Yeah.
And a very good idea. We should get that off the ground. Yes, and the lady at the front here.
Yeah, so I'm terrible. I'm not going to ask you all the questions, though I'd love to meet you all afterwards. So my film is showing as part of Channel 4 Pride, and I'm extremely proud. We've got an over-18 documentary with sex and fun and animation. So yeah, Rebel Dykes is coming to Channel 4. First broadcast premiere, and we're so proud. Thank you.
Any other questions, shout-outs? Yes.
I exec Wherever All the Lesbians Gone with Abby. And two things. One really interesting thing is it feels like broadcasters are now finally agreeing to have lesbians are allowed to make films about lesbians from a senior position all the way down to the runner. So it feels like we're beginning to be allowed to do that, and that's partly because there are now more lesbian and gay commissioners and trans and queer commissioners. But I really think it's important for people like me, who've worked in the industry all our careers, for younger filmmakers to reach out to us and to talk to us and get advice. And because we've been through all that shit, for a really long time, and we're trying to support new filmmakers and younger filmmakers. And I just think don't be shy about reaching out informally to any execs or anybody that you know of. Really, don't be shy, because we're all here to pull people up with us and to sort of support the younger generation. So that's all I want to say.
And what's your name and email?
Emma Hindley. Emma Hindley.
Emma Hindley. Okay, great. So everybody email Emma directly after us. Bombard her.
Really do.
Any other questions?
Oh, thank you for the panel. It was really amazing. To the question earlier, there's Trans Creative Collective. I'm sure you are aware, but yeah, it's a lot of young people. We've come together. It's a lot of trainees who work behind the camera, some in front, from music to film. And we do a lot of, I say we, it's a mutual friend, a lot of workshops to upskill ourselves and just to connect really, and put on events and hopefully make films and meet other creatives. So yeah.
Fantastic. And do we have a final couple of questions? Would anybody like to perform at the front? Oh, we've got, a question here.
How hopeful are you all about the future of broadcasting that reflects all of us?
Michael?
I sometimes worry that although Channel 4 Pride at 50 is brilliant, that knocks the nail on the head and that's it. And we've done gay, and we've done trans, and we've done lesbians. That's it now. And that's my big fear, is that actually it sort of disappears again because it's sort of happened and we've celebrated it and there's nothing new to say, when actually there's lots of stories out there that we should be telling.
I think I feel quite hopeful in the fact that I know that even if we're not allowed in by the big TV channels, we can do it ourselves. You know, I don't know any, just probably shouldn't say this on a Channel 4 thing, but most young people these days, like young, like teenagers and stuff, they don't even watch TV. They watch like YouTube. You can make it yourself on YouTube. Fuck having a good camera. You can, off iPhones these days, have got good enough cameras that you can record a decent film, and like you can do everything yourself. So like if you're not allowed to the table, set up your own bloody table on YouTube, you know, and then yeah. See you after, Emma. We'll have a little chat about that.
Abby?
Well, I only want to watch documentaries about lesbians, so I'm going to be making them. So I'm quite hopeful.
Start of a beautiful franchise.
I mean, as long as people stick around to make stuff and don't leave the industry, then I was going to say I'm hopeful, but then like hearing you guys about actually the whole, grassroots people making stuff, and doesn't need to be, oh, let's go to the channel and doff our caps and can we make this, please? Thank you very much. You can just be like, yeah, I'm just going to make it. I think the debate is about the future of broadcast television as a whole, rather than it just being about our representation, also the state of the bloody country. So I'm just rambling now. But I would hope that if we all try, then things will get better. Yeah. But I think we just can't give up trying, I suppose, in any shape or form.
I think that's a very hopeful note to end on. And Charlie, will you please end us with an extreme eye roll? Thank you. Thank you for coming.